I spent 8 years building my family's company. They replaced me with my brother and everything fell apart. I never thought I'd be the kind of person writing one of these posts. But here I am, sitting in my car outside the office building my grandfather built from nothing, watching my younger brother walk in as the new CEO, while I'm no longer even allowed inside. Yeah, let me explain. I'm 32, born and raised in Melbourne, Australia. My family owns a logistics and freight company that started with just one truck back in the late 70s. My grandfather built it from scratch. My dad expanded it, and I gave it everything. Or at least, I thought I did. Growing up, there were always two versions of my family. The one outsiders saw, and the one I lived in. Outsiders saw success, a tight-knit family, a legacy business, the kind of story people admire. What I saw, favoritism, clear, obvious, painfully consistent favoritism. My younger brother, Ryan, was the golden child. Always had been. Didn't matter what he did. Didn't matter how badly he screwed up. He was charismatic, natural leader, just like Dad. Meanwhile, I was the one staying up late helping in the warehouse at 16. I was the one skipping uni parties to intern in our own company for free. I was the one who actually cared about the business. But I was never the favorite. I was the reliable one. Which sounds like a compliment, until you realize it just means you're taken for granted. After university, I joined the company full-time. Not in some fancy management role either. No, Dad made me start from the ground up. Operations, inventory, dispatch, long hours, early mornings, weekend shifts. At the time, I told myself it was fair. That I had to earn it. Ryan, he joined 2 years later, straight into a management position. No experience, no background, just handed to him. I remember asking Dad about it once. He said, "Ryan has people skills. You're better behind the scenes." That sentence stuck with me. Because it didn't matter how hard I worked, I had already been assigned my place. Still, I kept going. Because the business mattered to me. More than anything, over the next 8 years, I basically rebuilt the operational side of the company. We had outdated systems, constant delays, staff turnover. It was a mess. I fixed it. I introduced tracking software, restructured warehouse processes, negotiated better supplier contracts, cut unnecessary costs. Within 3 years, our profit margins improved significantly. Even Dad admitted it once. At a dinner, in front of everyone, he said, "The business runs smoother now because of him." That was probably the only time I ever felt seen. Ryan, on the other hand, he was the face. Networking events, client dinners, media appearances. He loved it. And to be fair, he was good at talking. People liked him. But behind the scenes, he didn't know what he was doing. He'd promise things we couldn't deliver. He'd ignore operational limitations. And guess who had to fix the mess every single time? Me. Always me. Still, I kept quiet. Because I believed that eventually, results would matter. That when the time came, when Dad stepped down, he'd see who actually carried the company. I was wrong. Everything started falling apart about a year ago. We lost a major client. Then another. Then fuel costs went up. Margins tightened. Pressure built. For the first time in years, the business wasn't growing. And suddenly, everything became political. Board meetings got tense. Dad became distant. Ryan started acting different too. More aggressive, more defensive, like he knew something I didn't. I should have seen it coming. But I didn't. The turning point came during one particular board meeting. I had prepared a full restructuring plan. Detailed, realistic. It involved cutting certain unprofitable routes, investing in automation, and reducing unnecessary overhead. It wasn't pretty, but it would have saved the company. I presented everything, numbers, projections, risks. When I finished, the room was silent. Then Ryan spoke. He said my plan was too negative. That it would damage morale. That what we needed was growth strategy, not cutbacks. He proposed expanding into a new region instead. High risk, high cost, completely unrealistic given our current situation. I remember looking at Dad, waiting for him to say something. Anything. Instead, he nodded, and said, "Ryan might have a point." That was the moment I felt it. That sinking feeling, that it didn't matter what I said. The decision had already been made. Over the next few months, Ryan's plan was implemented. And just like I predicted, it failed, badly. We stretched resources too thin. Cash flow took a hit. Operations became chaotic again. Staff started quitting. Clients complained. It was a mess. And suddenly, I was being blamed. Not directly, but subtly. Comments like, "Operations aren't keeping up." Or, "We need better internal coordination." It was like watching someone crash a car, and then being told I should have driven better. Then came the day everything changed. Dad called for a family meeting. Just me, him, Ryan, and 2 board members. That alone felt wrong. Family meetings were never this formal. I walked in, and immediately knew something was off. The atmosphere was cold, distant. Dad didn't even look at me properly. He cleared his throat and started talking about the future of the company. About new leadership. About fresh direction. And then he said it. He said Ryan would be taking over as CEO, effective immediately. I just sat there, processing, trying to understand what I was hearing. 8 years. 8 years of building that company. And just like that, it was gone. I asked him why. Simple question. Why? And his answer. We need someone who can lead the company outwardly. Outwardly. That word again, like everything I did, didn't count because it wasn't visible. Then it got worse. He said they were restructuring leadership. And that my role was being phased out. Phased out. That's how he said it. Like I was some outdated system. I wasn't even fired directly. Just removed, given a severance package, and asked to step away for the good of the business. I looked at Ryan, waiting, hoping, maybe he'd say something. Defend me, acknowledge everything I'd done. He didn't. He just sat there, avoiding eye contact. That hurt more than anything. I didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't make a scene. I just stood up and walked out. And that was it. Just like that, I was no longer part of the company I helped build. For the first few weeks, I was numb. Didn't know what to do with myself. Every morning, I'd wake up at the same time, out of habit. And then remember, I had nowhere to go. Meanwhile, Ryan took over. New title, new authority, new image. From the outside, everything probably looked fine. But I still had contacts inside the company. People I trusted. And what they told me. Things were getting worse, faster than before. Ryan doubled down on expansion. Ignored operational warnings. Spent money like we were still in a growth phase. And the board, they backed him. Because he looked confident. Because he spoke well. Because he was the golden child. I wish I could say I didn't care. But I did. That company wasn't just a job to me. It was everything. And watching it fall apart from the outside, it was unbearable. Then, something unexpected happened. One of our biggest long-term clients reached out to me directly. He said he heard I was no longer with the company. And he had concerns, serious concerns, about delays, mismanagement, broken promises. He asked me a simple question. If you were still running operations, would this be happening? I didn't even hesitate. I said no. There was a long pause. And then he said something that changed everything. He said, if you ever start something of your own, call me. That was the first time since everything happened that I felt something shift. Not anger, not resentment, something else, opportunity. But here's the thing, starting over isn't easy, especially when your own family pushed you out, especially when your brother is now running the company you gave your life to. And especially when you know, deep down, that the business is heading towards something much worse than just struggling. Because the last message I got from someone still inside, it wasn't about delays, it wasn't about staff leaving, it was one sentence. Mate, I think the company's about to collapse. And that's when I realized, this story, it's not over, not even close. I didn't sleep that night, not after that message. Mate, I think the company's about to collapse. Those words just kept replaying in my head. Because here's the thing, people throw around that word, collapse, like it's dramatic. But in a business like ours, collapse doesn't happen overnight. It builds, slow, quiet, then all at once. And I knew exactly what that looked like. I'd seen the warning signs months ago, in that boardroom, when no one listened. Now it was happening, and I wasn't there anymore to stop it. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done since I left. I drove past the office. Didn't go in, just parked across the street. Watched. It felt surreal. Same building, same logo, same trucks coming in and out. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like something I used to belong to. Something that had moved on without me. I sat there for almost an hour. And then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick it up. Hey, is this you? I recognized the voice instantly. It was Mark, one of our senior warehouse supervisors. Been with the company longer than I had. Loyal, hardworking, not the kind of guy to panic. What's going on? I asked. There was a pause. Then he said, it's bad. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, just flat, serious. He started explaining. Drivers weren't getting proper schedules. Shipments were being double booked. Fuel payments were delayed. Some suppliers had already started refusing service unless paid up front. And the worst part, no one was coordinating anything properly. The systems I had put in place, ignored, overridden, or just not used. Ryan keeps changing things last minute, Mark said. No one knows what's happening anymore. I closed my eyes, because I could picture it perfectly. Chaos, pure chaos. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Another pause. Then he said something that hit harder than I expected. Because you're the only one who actually knew how this place worked. That one sentence. It stayed with me. After the call ended, I just sat there in silence. Because now it wasn't just speculation. It was real. It was happening. And the worst part, it was preventable. Completely preventable. But no one listened. I went home, but I couldn't shake it. All day, I kept thinking about the company. About the people still working there. About everything I built, slowly falling apart. And then, around 7 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it was someone I didn't expect. Ryan. I stared at the screen for a solid 10 seconds. Debating whether to answer. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Let him deal with his own mess. But another part of me needed to know why he was calling. So I picked up. Hello. For a moment, there was silence. Then he said, "We need to talk." No arrogance. No confidence. Just tension. I leaned back in my chair. About what? Another pause. Then he said it. "Things aren't going well." That might have been the understatement of the year. But I didn't interrupt. I let him talk. He started explaining. Clients pulling out. Cash flow issues. Operational breakdowns. Basically everything I already knew. But hearing it from him, that was different. Because for the first time, he sounded unsure. Not the confident, smooth-talking guy everyone saw. Just someone who was in over his head. "I need your help," he said. There it was. The sentence I never thought I'd hear. I didn't respond immediately. I just let the silence sit. Because I wanted him to feel it. To really understand what he was asking. Finally, I said, "You kicked me out." Straight to the point. No emotion. Just fact. "I know," he said quickly. "But this is bigger than that." Bigger than that. I almost laughed. Because to him, this was just business. But to me, it was everything. Years of work, loyalty, trust, gone. And now, when things were falling apart, now he needed me. "I can't just walk back in like nothing happened," I said. "I'm not asking you to," he replied. "Just help fix things. Behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, of course. Right back where they always wanted me. Invisible. Fixing problems no one else wanted to deal with." While he stayed the face. The leader. The golden child. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. "No." Silence. Then, "No, no," I repeated. "You made your decision. Live with it." He exhaled sharply. Frustrated. "Do you have any idea what's at stake?" He said. That question, that's what flipped something in me. Because yes, I did. More than he ever would. "I built half of what's at stake," I said quietly. "Don't talk to me like I don't understand." That shut him up. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he tried a different approach. "Look, if the company goes under, it affects all of us. The family. Dad. Dad made his choice too," I cut in. Another silence. He wasn't used to this. Not from me. Not from the reliable one. "Just think about it," he said finally. "Please." And then, he hung up. I sat there for a long time after that call. Because now everything was real. Not just rumors. Not just updates. But direct. Immediate. The company was in trouble. Serious trouble. And they wanted me back. But only on their terms. That night, I barely slept again. But this time, it wasn't anger. It was something else. Clarity. Because for the first time since everything happened, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was thinking. Strategically. That client's words came back to me. "If you ever start something of your own, call me." And suddenly, everything started connecting. The company was weak. Clients were unhappy. Staff were frustrated. Suppliers were losing trust. There was a gap forming in the market. A big one. And I knew exactly how to fill it. The next morning, I made a decision. Not emotional. Not impulsive. Calculated. I wasn't going back. Not as an employee. Not as a shadow fixer. Not as the guy cleaning up someone else's mess. If I was going back into that industry, it would be on my terms. So I picked up my phone, scrolled to that client's number, and called him. He answered almost immediately. "Hey," he said, "I was hoping you'd call." I took a breath, and said the words that would change everything. "I'm starting my own company." There was a brief pause. Then he laughed, not in a mocking way, in a impressed way. "Good," he said, "about time." That one word, good. It felt like validation I hadn't had in years. "I'll bring you our contract," he continued. "As soon as you're ready." Just like that. First client. Before I even had a company name. I hung up, and just sat there. Because now, there was no going back. This wasn't about fixing the past anymore. This was about building something new. Something better. Something that couldn't be taken away from me. But here's the thing. Starting a business is one thing. Starting it while your family's company is collapsing. That's something else entirely. Because what I didn't know yet was that Ryan wasn't the only one who was about to lose control. The board was panicking. Investors were getting involved. And my father, the man who chose my brother over me, was about to do something desperate. Something that would drag me right back into this mess. Whether I wanted it or not. The moment I said, I'm starting my own company, something inside me changed. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for approval. I wasn't trying to prove myself to my dad. I wasn't cleaning up after Ryan. I was building something that was mine. And that scared me a little. But it also felt right. The next few days were a blur. Phone calls, planning, reaching out to old contacts I trusted. People I knew were good at their jobs. People who had been overlooked, just like me. And here's the thing, I didn't even have to convince most of them. They were already frustrated, already tired, already thinking about leaving. I just gave them a reason. Within a week, I had 3 key people ready to join me. Mark, the warehouse supervisor who called me. A dispatcher named Lisa who had basically been running things quietly for years. And a driver named Ahmed who knew routes better than anyone. Solid people, the kind of team you can actually build something with. I hadn't even registered the business officially yet, and things were already moving. That's when the second call came. This time, from Dad. I stared at the screen longer than I did when Ryan called. Because this was different. I almost didn't answer, but I knew, if I didn't pick up now, he'd find another way. So I answered, hello. There was no small talk. No, how are you? Just straight into it. I heard you're planning something. Of course he did. News travels fast, especially in a company that's falling apart. I didn't deny it. Yeah, I said, I am. Silence. Then he said, you're making a mistake. I let out a slow breath. Because that response, it told me everything. Not, I'm proud of you. Not, let's talk. Just, you're wrong. I don't think I am, I replied. His tone shifted slightly, more serious, more controlled. You don't understand the situation, he said. The company is going through a rough phase. That's all, a rough phase. I almost smiled, because that's how he still saw it. Denial, pure denial. Suppliers are pulling out, I said. Clients are leaving, staff are quitting. That's not a rough phase. He didn't respond immediately, and that silence, that was the first crack. You've been talking to people, he said finally. Yeah, I replied. People who are actually dealing with the consequences. That hit a nerve, I could tell. His voice hardened. You're crossing a line, after everything. That's what he chose to say. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. No, I said quietly. You crossed it when you pushed me out. That was the first time I'd said it directly to him. No filters, no respect masking the truth. Just honesty. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said something that completely changed the direction of the conversation. If you go through with this, you're not just competing with the business. He paused. You're going against the family. There it was, the card he always held. Family, loyalty, obligation. Except, it didn't work anymore. Because the moment they removed me, they made that choice first. I'm not the one who turned this into a competition, I said. You did. Another silence. But this one felt heavier. Because deep down, he knew I was right. Then he tried a different approach. And this is what shocked me. We can bring you back, he said. I froze. Not because I wanted it, but because of how quickly the tone shifted. From warning, to negotiation. Back where? I asked. As head of operations, he said. Same as before. Same as before. That sentence alone told me everything. Nothing had changed. Same role, same position, same invisible work, different leadership, same treatment. And Ryan, I asked. He stays as CEO. Of course he does. Golden Child stays on top. No matter what. I leaned back in my chair, and for the first time during that call, I smiled. Not out of happiness, but because everything was finally clear. You don't want me back, I said. You want me to fix it. He didn't deny it. That was the answer. And in that moment, whatever doubt I had left, it disappeared. I'm not coming back, I said. Flat, final, no hesitation. His response was immediate. You're being emotional. That made me laugh. Actually laugh. Because for years, I had done the opposite. I had been logical, patient, loyal, and where did that get me? Kicked out, replaced, erased. No, I said, I'm finally thinking clearly. That was the moment the conversation broke. I could hear it in his voice. The control slipping. You're going to regret this, he said. Maybe I would, but not in the way he thought. Goodbye, Dad, I said. And I hung up. Just like that. No shouting, no drama, just done. I sat there for a while after that call. Because cutting off that conversation, it wasn't easy. No matter what happened, he was still my father. But business, that was something else now. And the truth was, he didn't call me because he believed in me. He called because he needed me. And that difference, it matters a lot. The next few days, things moved even faster. I registered the company, got a small office space. Nothing fancy, just enough to start. We didn't even have proper furniture yet. Half the time, we were working off laptops on folding tables. But the energy, completely different. No politics, no ego, just people who actually wanted to make things work. And then, the first big shift happened. Mark called me again, but this time, his tone was different. Not worried, not stressed, just direct. "I've got 2 drivers ready to leave," he said. "They want to come with us." I didn't even hesitate. "Bring them in." That's how it started. 1 driver, then 2, then 4. People weren't just unhappy anymore. They were leaving, and not randomly. They were coming to me. Because word had spread that I was building something new, something stable, something familiar. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a startup anymore. This was becoming a shift. A real one. But every action has a reaction. And it didn't take long for that reaction to come. Because one evening, as I was wrapping up for the day, I got another message from someone inside the company. Short, simple, but it changed everything. "Emergency board meeting, tonight. It's bad." I stared at the message. Because if the board was calling an emergency meeting, that meant one thing. They were panicking. And panic leads to desperate decisions. Decisions that don't always make sense. Decisions that can destroy everything. And something told me, this wasn't just about finances anymore. This was about control. Because when businesses start collapsing, people don't just try to save them. They try to protect themselves. And if that meant turning on each other, so be it. What I didn't know yet was that by the end of that meeting, my brother's position wouldn't be as secure as he thought. My father would be forced into a corner. And a decision would be made that would pull me right back into the center of this war. Not as an employee, not as a backup plan, but as something else entirely. Something none of them were ready for. I didn't get invited to that emergency board meeting, but I didn't need to be there. Because by now, I had people on the inside. People who trusted me, people who were watching everything unfold in real time. And around 9:40 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Mark." I picked up instantly. "What's happening?" For a second, all I could hear was noise in the background. Voices. Raised voices. Then he said, quietly, "It's chaos." Not surprising. But what he said next, that was, "They've got the financials open, everything." I frowned. "What do you mean everything?" A pause. Then, debt, losses, loans, stuff no one knew about. I stood up, slowly, because that wasn't just bad management. That was something else. "How bad?" I asked. There was another pause, longer this time, like he was choosing his words carefully. "Worse than you think," he said. "They've been covering it up." That sentence hit like a punch. Because if the board didn't know, if the numbers were hidden, then this wasn't just Ryan messing up. This went higher. "Who knew?" I asked. And deep down, I already had a feeling. Mark didn't answer immediately, but when he did, he confirmed it. "Your dad." Of course he knew. Everything started connecting in my head. The sudden push for expansion. The urgency. The refusal to cut costs. They weren't trying to grow the company. They were trying to outrun the problem. Debt, hidden losses, bad financial decisions stacking up behind the scenes. And instead of fixing it properly, they gambled hard. And now, it was catching up. "What about Ryan?" I asked. "He looks shocked," Mark said. Like he didn't know. For a moment, I just stood there in silence. Because that changed things. A lot. Ryan wasn't the mastermind. He wasn't pulling the strings. He was just the face. The one put in charge, without being told the full truth. Golden child, but not trusted with reality. And now, he was sitting in a room full of angry board members. Finding out that the company he just took over was already sinking. "That meeting's not ending well," Mark added. "No," I said quietly. "It's not." The call ended, and I just stood there, processing everything. Because this wasn't just a failing business anymore. This was a ticking bomb. And it had just gone off. The next morning, I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. By 8:15 a.m., my phone was already blowing up. Messages, missed calls, updates from multiple people, and every single one of them said the same thing in different ways. Something big happened. Really big. I called Lisa first. She picked up immediately. "Tell me," I said. She didn't waste time. "The board tore them apart," she said. "Especially your dad." I closed my eyes. "Yeah, I could imagine. They didn't know about the full debt," she continued. "Or the short-term loans. Or how bad the cash flow actually is." "So what now?" I asked. There was a slight pause. Then she said something that made me stop walking completely. "They've removed Ryan as CEO." Silence. Real silence. Because even after everything, I didn't expect it to happen this fast. "Removed," I repeated. "Effective immediately," she said. "They voted last night." I exhaled slowly. Because just like that, the golden child fell. Not gradually, not quietly, overnight. And suddenly, everything shifted. "What about Dad?" I asked. Another pause. "He's still there," she said. "But not in control anymore. That made sense. If he hid financials, if he misled the board, they wouldn't trust him again. Not fully. He's under pressure, she added. Big pressure. Of course he was. Because now, this wasn't just business failure. This was accountability. Real accountability. And people like him, they don't handle that well. What are they going to do? I asked. Lisa hesitated. And that hesitation told me everything. They don't have a plan, she said. They're scrambling. Of course they were. Because the one thing they relied on, the one thing they always assumed would hold everything together, was gone. Control. And now, they didn't have it. The call ended, and I just stood there, letting it all sink in. Ryan was out. Dad was cornered. The board was panicking, and the company, still collapsing. But here's the part no one saw coming. Around noon, I got an email, not a call, not a message, an official email, from the board. I stared at the sender for a few seconds before opening it. Because something told me, this wasn't casual, this was calculated. I opened it, read the first line, and felt my entire body go still. We would like to formally request a meeting to discuss your potential return to the company in a leadership capacity. Leadership capacity, not operations, not support, leadership. That was new. I kept reading. Given your previous contributions and deep understanding of the company's operational structure, we believe you are uniquely positioned to assist in stabilizing the business. Terms to be discussed in person. I stopped there, because I didn't need to read the rest. The message was clear. They needed me, not quietly, not behind the scenes, but openly, publicly, because now, they had no choice. And suddenly, everything flipped. A few weeks ago, I was the one being removed, phased out. Now, they were asking me to come back. And led. I sat down slowly, because this was the moment, the kind of moment you don't get twice. The kind of moment that defines everything that comes after. But here's the thing, it wasn't simple, because going back meant stepping into a mess. A broken system, a company drowning in debt and distrust. It meant working with the same people who pushed me out. The same board, the same environment, and my father, he'd still be there, watching. And Ryan, gone, but not really gone. Because family doesn't disappear that easily. But staying away, that had its own risks. Because if the company collapsed completely, it wouldn't just hurt them. It would hurt everyone. Employees, clients, people who had nothing to do with the decisions at the top. And I knew that, better than anyone. My phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from Mark. Simple, direct. You going back. I stared at the screen. Because I didn't have an answer yet. Not a clear one. Not an easy one. All I knew was this. For years, I worked under them. Then I was pushed out. Now, they were asking me to come back on my terms. And the power, for the first time, was in my hands. But what I didn't know yet, was that accepting that offer would come with a condition. A condition so unexpected, it would force me to choose between saving the business, or finally walking away from my family for good. I didn't reply to the email immediately. Not because I didn't know what it meant, but because I knew exactly what it meant. This wasn't just an offer. It was leverage. For the first time in my life, they needed me more than I needed them. And that changes everything. I spent the rest of the day thinking. Not emotionally, not like before, but strategically. If I walked back into that company, it wouldn't be as the same person who got pushed out. It couldn't be, because if I accepted anything less than real control, I'd just be stepping back into the same trap. Different title, same outcome, and I wasn't doing that again. By evening, I made my decision. I replied to the email. Short, direct, I'll meet, tomorrow, 10 a.m. That was it. No enthusiasm. No negotiation over email, because this needed to be face to face. The next morning, I walked into that building for the first time since I left. Same reception, same smell, same quiet tension in the air. But this time, people looked at me differently. Not like an employee, not like the operations guy, but like something else. Word had spread. They knew why I was there. I was led into the boardroom. And the moment I walked in, everything hit at once. The same table, the same chairs, the same people, but the energy, completely different. No confidence, no control, just pressure. My father was there, sitting at the far end. He looked older, not physically, but mentally, tired. Ryan wasn't there. That was the first thing I noticed. One of the board members stood up. Thank you for coming, he said. I nodded. Didn't sit yet. I wanted them to feel it. The shift. You said you wanted to discuss leadership, I said. Straight to the point. No small talk, no pretending. They exchanged glances. Then one of them said, we'd like you to step in as interim CEO. Interim, of course. Temporary control. Fix the mess. Then what? Back to being replaced. I almost smiled. You don't need an interim CEO, I said. You need stability. Silence. They were listening. Good. And I'm not coming in temporarily, I continued. If I step in, It's permanent. That landed hard. One of them leaned forward. That's something we can discuss. No, I cut in. That's something you decide now. I pulled out the chair and finally sat down, because now, this was my room. You want me to fix this? I said. Then I fix it my way. They didn't interrupt, didn't push back, because they knew they didn't have many options left. I continued. Full operational control, no interference, no hidden decisions, no last-minute changes. I paused, then added the part that mattered most. And if I find out anything's being kept from me, I walk. Immediately. That was directed at my father. I didn't even need to look at him. He felt it. The room stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then one of the board members said, "That's reasonable." Reasonable. A few weeks ago, I wouldn't have even been allowed to say half of this. Now, they were agreeing, because pressure changes power. But then, the conversation shifted, and this is where everything changed. One of the senior board members cleared his throat. There is one condition. Of course there was. There's always a condition. I leaned back. Go on. He hesitated slightly, like even he knew this wouldn't go down easily. If you take over as CEO, he said, your father will need to step down completely. Silence. Real silence. Because that wasn't business anymore. That was personal. I turned my head slowly and looked at my father. For the first time since I walked in, he didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the table. Tight, controlled, but I could see it. This was the line, the real one, because removing Ryan, that was easy. He was already failing. But removing my father, the man who built the company, the man who chose my brother over me, that was different. That was final. He can't stay on the board, the member continued. Not after what's come out. Financial cover-ups, hidden debt, bad decisions. This wasn't just about leadership anymore. It was about trust, and he had lost it. I sat there, processing, because this was the condition. Not a contract clause, not a salary negotiation, a choice. Take control of the company, and remove my father, or walk away, and let everything collapse. No middle ground, no compromise. I finally spoke. What happens if I say no? The answer came immediately. Then we find someone else. But we all knew the truth. There was no one else. Not really. Not who understood the business like I did. Not who the staff trusted. Not who the clients would follow. This was it. This was the moment. I looked at my father again. This time, he looked up, and for a second, there was something in his eyes I had never seen before. Not authority, not confidence, something else. Uncertainty, maybe even regret. But it was too late for that. Years too late. You built this company, I said to him. My voice calm, steady, but you also put it here. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself, because deep down, he knew. I exhaled slowly, because this decision, it wasn't just about business. It was about everything that came before it. Every ignored effort, every unfair decision, every moment I chose loyalty, and got pushed aside for it. And now, I had the power to choose. Not just what happens to the company, but what happens to him. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. Nothing else mattered right now. The entire room was watching me, waiting, because whatever I said next, that was it. No going back, no second chances. And the truth was, I already knew my answer. But saying it out loud, that was the hard part. Because once I did, everything would change, forever. The room was completely silent. No one moved, no one spoke. They were all waiting for me, for my answer. And the truth was, I already knew what I was going to say. I just needed to say it out loud. I leaned forward slightly, resting my hands on the table, and looked straight at my father. Not as a son, not anymore, but as someone who finally understood exactly who he was. You built this company, I said again, calmly. And I respect that. A small pause. Then, but you also broke it. No reaction, no interruption. So I continued, and I won't fix it, just to hand it back. That was the first clear signal. A shift, a boundary. The board members leaned in slightly. My father didn't move. I exhaled slowly, then said the words that ended everything. I'll take the role. Silence. A few glances exchanged across the table. But I wasn't finished. On one condition, I added. They frowned slightly, because now, I was adding my own condition. You don't just step down, I said, looking at my father. You walk away completely. That landed harder than anything else. Because this wasn't the board forcing him out anymore. This was me, his son, making that call. No influence, no backdoor decisions, no involvement at all. I continued. You're done. The room felt heavier instantly. Because now it wasn't just business. It was final. I held his gaze, waiting, because for once, the decision wasn't his, it was mine. And after everything, I needed to hear him say it. A few seconds passed, then 10, then 20, and finally, he spoke, quietly. I understand. That was it. No argument, no anger, no authority, just acceptance. And somehow, That hit harder than if he had fought back. Because it meant one thing. He knew he lost, not just the position, but control, over the company, over the narrative, over me. The board moved quickly after that. Formalities, agreements, votes, but honestly, I barely heard any of it. Because in my head, everything had already shifted. By the time I walked out of that room, it was done. I was CEO. Not interim, not temporary, permanent, and my father, gone. Just like that. The next few weeks were brutal. No other way to describe it. The company was worse than it looked from the outside. Dead everywhere, broken contracts, angry clients, disconnected systems, and a team that had completely lost trust in leadership. But this time, things were different, because I wasn't fixing someone else's mess quietly. I was in control, fully. Decisions were made fast, clear, no politics, no ego. I shut down unprofitable routes immediately, renegotiated supplier contracts, cut unnecessary expenses, rebuilt operational systems from scratch. And most importantly, I brought in people I trusted. Mark, Lisa, Ahmed, and others who had already made the jump. Slowly, things started stabilizing. Not perfectly, not instantly, but steadily. Clients who had left, some of them came back. Because they trusted me, not the company, me, and that made all the difference. About a month in, I finally saw Ryan again. He showed up at the office. Unannounced. I was in my office when reception called. Said he was asking for me. I told them to send him up. When he walked in, he looked different. Not the confident guy from before. Not the golden child. Just tired, frustrated, human. We stood there for a moment. No words. Just history. Then he said it. I didn't know. Simple, direct, and honestly, I believed him. He didn't know about the financials. The debt, the real situation. He was thrown into a position he wasn't ready for, and expected to succeed anyway. Just like I was expected to fix everything without recognition. Different roles, same problem. I nodded slowly. I know, I said. He looked surprised, like he expected anger, blame, something heavier, but I didn't have that anymore. Not for him. You still took it, I added. And that mattered. He looked down, didn't argue, because again, he knew. I thought I could handle it, he said quietly. I leaned back slightly. Yeah, I replied. So did I. That line hung in the air. Because it wasn't just about him. It was about both of us. Different paths, same expectations, same pressure, just different outcomes. What happens now? He asked. I thought about it for a second. Because this was another choice. Another moment. I run the company, I said. Properly this time. He nodded slowly. And me, I looked at him, really looked. Because for the first time, he wasn't the golden child. He wasn't the competition. He was just my brother. Someone who made mistakes. Someone who got put in a role he didn't earn. And paid for it. You want to stay? I asked. He looked surprised. Again, stay, he repeated. Yeah, I said, but not at the top. No sugarcoating. No special treatment. Start where you should have started, I continued. Learn the business properly. That was the offer. Not punishment. Not revenge. A reset. A real one. He hesitated. For a long moment. Because this was his test. Not mine. Finally, he nodded. Okay. And just like that, for the first time in our lives, things were fair. As for my father, I didn't see him again. Not at the office. Not at home. Nothing. He kept his word. Walked away completely. And honestly, I don't know if that was easier. Or harder. Because part of me expected a confrontation. A final argument. Something. But it never came. Just silence. 6 months later, the company wasn't just surviving. It was recovering. Slowly. Steadily. Stronger than before. Not because of luck. Not because of image. But because of structure. Because of truth. Because of decisions that actually made sense. And me, for the first time, I wasn't trying to prove anything. To anyone. I wasn't chasing approval. I wasn't fixing things quietly. I was leading. On my terms. Sometimes, people ask me if I regret it. Taking over. Making that decision. Choosing business over family. And the truth is, it was never that simple. Because family made it business first. I just finished it. And if there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's this. Being overlooked doesn't mean you're not capable. Sometimes, it just means you're in the wrong position. And the moment you step out of it, everything changes.